Book banning is not a hoax. I don't care what anyone told you. I don't care if my governor has been saying it for years, and I don't care if my country's Department of Education has decided to perpetuate lies. Book banning is not a hoax. So let's talk about book censorship, and let's talk about the book community needing to get loud about book banning. Hi, my name's Rachel, and today I have a very special video for you. I've invited a boatload of content creators to come on and talk about book censorship and book banning because the community needs to come together on this and every voice is needed. If you, for some reason, are watching this and have not been here before, I'm a bookish content creator and I make a lot of videos about book censorship. This happened sort of as a fluke where I was watching this indie author complain about, in 2021, her kid's school district allowing books that she thought were inappropriate. So I looked into it, and what I found was Moms for Liberty. For some reason, I had no idea what was going on in my own state regarding Moms for Liberty until a year after this. So I first began talking about book banning in 2021 in the context of Texas. Little did I know, my own state needed my advocacy. And I think that that's probably the case for a lot of you. You don't know that this is happening in your state. It doesn't matter if you live in New York. It's happening there too. It doesn't matter if you live in California. There's attempts there too. My governor is Ron DeSantis, who I have nothing nice to say about, and he has been trying for years to pass off local and state censorship as a book banning hoax. He even invited my local censorship advocate, Julie Gebhards, who is no longer even a public schools parent, to come speak over us actual public schools parents publicly about this. Now the federal government has also adopted this stance of book banning is a hoax. It is not. Book censorship has been on the rise. It will continue to be on the rise. It is a problem that's getting worse, and there is no reason for you to sit and not do anything about it. Some of your favorite stories might be getting challenged or censored at your local public library or local schools. Stories like your lived experience or the lived experiences of your loved ones or your friends or your neighbors. These are being deemed unworthy for public consumption or age inappropriate. They use a lot of euphemisms to try to get you to agree with them. Don't. This censorship includes a variety of stories in a vast amount of age ranges, everything from young adult to middle grade to children's picture books. And you'll hear about some of these stories today. I am so grateful to everybody who participated in this today. I really want the book community to just start talking about censorship together, but I wanted everybody to talk about it accurately. We need to give as much information as possible when we talk about book censorship. I specifically asked everybody who's coming on today to help me demystify the conversation and unmuddy the waters on this issue by saying where their favorite books are challenged and or banned and why, and if they could find out, by whom. Because when you learn those pieces to this puzzle, the bigger problem with censorship, particularly the kind that's happening in the US right now, becomes clear, and it is alarming. You should be alarmed. Now, before I let everyone else take it away, I'm going to define some terms here so that we're all on the same page before we proceed, because I don't want anyone leaving comments like these. These are uneducated takes. You don't need to say them anymore. If you don't know what book banning is, then allow me to educate you on this. Book banning does not mean a book is made completely unavailable. That is a very minimalistic way to define a broad spectrum of actions that are all rooted in the desire to control others. Book censorship, as I said, is a spectrum of actions. It has never been defined in such a minimal way by any reputable organization or group of people. No one who is being honest about this problem would say that the only bans are federal bans. People challenge books at a local level first. A book challenge is an attempt to remove or restrict materials based on the objections of a person or group. This is always the first step towards a goal of censorship. You challenge at a local place first, a local public library, a local school. Then they try to work their way up from a local institution to the broader piece of that institution, the entire public library system in a county or the entire public school library system in a county. Then they want to work up to the state level, and then they want to work up to the federal level. We are now seeing the beginnings of federal bans, with the federal government banning books from Department of Defense education activity, schools which are schools for military members' children on military bases, which are federally run. This is a stepping stone towards more federal restrictions, just like the local bans were a stepping stone towards this DODEA measure. Censorship is never an isolated incident. It is always part of a larger pattern, and that pattern starts with a challenge. They are typically done by a formal form provided by a school or a library or a district, and here are some examples of challenge forms. For children's picture books, young adult books, and middle grade books. A person fills out these forms in the hope to censor the material. Sometimes the outcome is a book is banned from one school library, or it is moved from a middle school library into a high school library, which was the case for this book about Palestinian youth voices in a middle school in New York, which was deemed unfit for the middle school. Somehow, despite the fact that it interviews 8 and 12-year-old children, it was moved to a high school. This is one form of censorship, deeming age-appropriate things as inappropriate and making them inaccessible for their intended audience. But it will not end there. Eventually, they will deem it inappropriate for the high school as well. Sometimes a book is banned just in the middle schools in a district. Sometimes a book is banned throughout the entire district. These are all different types of censorship. Book banning is defined by the First Amendment Society, and Encyclopedia Britannica agrees as book banning, a form of censorship that occurs when private individuals or government officials or organizations remove books from libraries or school reading lists or bookstore shelves because they object to their content, ideas, or themes. It does not have to be all of those places. The key word there is or. If you ban a book from one place, you have banned that book in that place. A ban is a ban is a ban. If you understand how a dry county works, then you understand book banning on a local level. It is not enough to just Google the word ban. Book banning has its own context, just like alcohol bans have their own context. To leave out that context is to lie about the state of affairs as far as censorship in the United States. Now, you might say, why did you bring people on who talked about books that have only so far been challenged and not actually banned from anywhere? Why not only allow people to talk about successful bans? Because failed challenges are still attempts at bans. They are still attempts at censorship, and they speak to a broader issue of civilians, sometimes in groups such as Moms for Liberty, attempting to install themselves as the arbiter of moral versus immoral for the rest of the population. They also are very revealing when you read the challenge forms, which I encourage you to do so, because you will learn that yes, people are trying to get books banned because they don't like queer folks and people of color. Their challenges reveal exactly who they are and what their ultimate goal is. And just because a challenge fails does not mean that that intent and that mindset is not there. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be pushed back against. You should pay attention when other people reveal themselves to be attempting to prevent your children or yourself from accessing information and media. Personally, I want to know when people are trying to enact their will upon my kids, even when they fail. Those failed challenges speak to blatant bigotry and show what their actual intention is. And I want to protect myself and my kids and others from those people and those ideologies. Similarly, even when proposed bills that are horrifying fail, it is not just a victory simply because, oh, it failed. Whoever brought that bill forth still believes that they should have that control over you and others, and they will try again. And I want to know about them. You should want to know about them so that you know who is in positions of power, what are they trying to achieve, and how can you protect yourself and others. What you will see is that bigots are birds of a feather. They flock together. They are like a virus. They take each other's bigotry and they spread it. So while measures might fail in one county or in one state, their friends in positions of power in other counties and other states will copy their homework and enact laws for your friends outside of your state. And as we have learned time and time again, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We must first know about this problem in order to combat it, and we only can combat it in community with each other. You might also ask why I let people talk about any book, and you might say, oh, didn't somebody already talk about this book in this video? So you might see a couple of books twice, but I wanted to keep them all, and I didn't tell anybody, oh, somebody already did that book, because the myriad of opinions is something that we need to celebrate, because that is very specifically what censorship advocates are actively trying to erase. The more opinions, yes, even on the same book, the better. I try to bring as many people as possible into this because just like the people who are censorship advocates are trying to redefine the term book banning to only mean this very specific action that they're not doing yet, they're also trying to redefine the problem as parents versus non-parents, and non-parents includes anybody who doesn't agree with them. They have repositioned themselves as the only parents, and certainly the only parents whose opinions matter. They have demonized the ALA and authors and the teachers' unions, and they reclassify these people, even though these people are also parents. They reclassify this issue as us versus them, the parents versus the authors, the parents versus the librarians, when really a lot of it is public schools parents versus private schools parents, if they even have school-age kids at all. Some folks might even disagree within this video from book to book on whether or not they would let their own kid read such and such. But that's where that myriad of opinions is so valuable, because everybody has the right to decide that for their own kids, for themselves. I was really excited to get one teacher in on this video. Thank you to Ashunti for talking about the hate you give. It meant a lot to me putting this video together and seeing everybody talk about their different perspectives, and it's such a stark contrast between what I've experienced dealing face to face with Moms for Liberty and other book censorship advocate groups versus this huge diverse group of people who includes teachers and librarians and just public schools parents, because it's so clear to me that one group actually cares about kids and one group does not. And I think you'll see that today. So without any further ado, I've been talking for a really long time, sorry. I'm gonna let everybody else take it away, and thank you again to everybody for participating.
Hi Rachel's channel. My name is Ellie Blackwood. I'm a fantasy writer in progress who likes making bookish video essays, and I'm here to tell you about one of my favorite banned books and why it shouldn't be banned. The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas is a young adult horror/thriller novel that was published in July of 2021. It follows the titular Jake Livingston, who is the only queer black boy in his majority white prep school and who also has the ability to see ghosts. And when a vengeful ghost starts murdering people in his neighborhood, it's up to Jake to stop it, or else he might be next. In February of 2024, Clay County School District in Florida banned the taking of Jake Livingston in response to a formal challenge. The Clear Creek Amana Community School District in Iowa also removed the book in June of 2024 in response to a sweeping book ban law, though they later returned it to shelves. I wasn't able to find the specific complaint about exactly why the taking of Jake Livingston was banned in Florida, but 44% of the books challenged in the 2023 to 2024 school year represented the voices and lived experiences of people of color, and 39% for LGBTQ+ people, a disproportionate amount compared to the percentage of published books that represent those experiences, so we can make some guesses. The book may have also been targeted because, like many horror novels, The Taking of Jake Livingston deals with some tough real-life topics in a teen-appropriate way. Anti-black racism, homophobia, school shootings, mental health, abuse, and suicide. Teens in real life navigate these issues every day, and banning books that contain heavy topics from school libraries doesn't make those issues go away, it just makes students feel isolated. Indeed, Ryan Douglas wrote the book for kids facing the same isolation due to racism and homophobia that he felt growing up. In an interview with We Need Diverse Books, Douglas said, "Literature is supposed to represent the human experience, right? So when you go to the shelves and you're reading about the human experience and your human experience is not in there, that sends a message that you are not human." By banning this book, the school district made the active decision to tell kids facing racism and homophobia that they are not welcome. And on top of all that, The Taking of Jake Livingston is a relatively short, fast page-turner that a lot of teens would really love. Jake is a genuinely compassionate person with realistic flaws, and it's impossible not to root for him, both in terms of defeating the ghost and getting the romance he deserves. The book incorporates its social themes very naturally, in keeping with a long-standing tradition in the horror genre. As Douglas said in an interview with Penguin Teen, horror doesn't always have to be about monsters. It can be about the heartbreak of everyday interactions, the trauma of navigating broken relationships. Those traumas combined with actual monsters and the conversation between them always makes for a layered horror story. I hope you'll consider picking up The Taking of Jake Livingston, and I hope that one day schools will carry books on their shelves that make all of their students feel seen, rather than shutting some of them out.
Hello everybody, my name is Ashunti. I'm a bookish influencer. You can find me on all the platforms, and my favorite banned book is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is my favorite banned book because it is a book that I actually teach in my class. So if you have never seen me before, you probably don't know, but I am also an educator who teaches 9th grade African American literature. And this is one of the books that I have taught now 2 years in a row. And I have personally experienced the way it has opened up so many important conversations about race, racism, identity, systemic oppression, and all those topics in our country in a way that my students, my 14 and 15-year-olds, are able to not only express their own experiences, but learn to comprehend these things and start understanding how they fit in the world and in society. society and what they are going to be seeing and experiencing when they go out into the world, as well as ways that they can deal with the effects of this, because for a lot of them, they haven't had the language to put together to the experiences they've had, and this book has helped me to teach them that language. It has helped me to have these conversations with them. It has helped me to open up space in my room to allow them to process their thoughts and process what they're seeing in the world. And so I understand the importance of a book like this being there in the classroom to start these conversations and to be on the shelves for students to read. And past those conversations, I have also seen the way that my students enjoy this story and have gained so much. Every student, and not every student, but most of my students, if they've read this book before, they said this is one of their favorite books. After reading it in my class, they tell me how much they enjoyed this, and I do a survey at the end to ask them if they think this is a book that is worthwhile for the next incoming freshmen to read. And I have each year gotten a yes that I have done this, and that is why I continue to teach this. This book is challenged all over America, and I am so happy that I'm lucky enough to be able to keep this in my classroom and have people who support me and encourage me to teach not only this book, but other books like it. So thank you, Angie Thomas, for putting this book out. Thank you for everybody who fights that this book being challenged. And honestly, I am so proud of myself for choosing this story and making sure that my kids can have these challenging conversations, because it is challenging to have these conversations as an adult. It is challenging to have these conversations as an adult talking to children. And I am so happy to be putting in the work, and I'm so grateful that every year I make this choice to continue to include stories like this. So make sure you check out the Hate You Give by Angie Thomas if you have never heard of this story before or checked it out.
I'm going to mention two different books that have been banned at some point, one of which is definitely a lot more serious and the other one is a lot sillier, and in some ways I think that makes it sadder, because you would never think that something so inconsequential that someone would take issue with it, but alas, that is kind of just the way in which things occur when it comes to the banning of books. But this first one, I think, is written by an author who has more than likely had at the very least most works challenged, if not banned completely, and that would be Octavia Butler, but the book I wanted to mention would be Parable of the Sower. This author just has a way of cutting to the core of what causes societies to become depraved, what allows for humans to justify their actions, and also what things are humans willing to put up with and accept if it means that they can benefit in some way. She has a way of sort of looking at the past and taking, you could almost argue, inspiration from how people have been in the past as well as the present, and then taking those things and saying, if this is the path we're going to continue on, that within Parable of the Sower, it's basically saying this is where we are headed if we're not in some form here already. I personally feel works like that are in some ways like cautionary tales, but also, even though in this story you are examining the worst of people, there is a seed of hope, I think, in a lot of ways. There's a lot of symbolism, I think, in Parable of the Sower when it comes to that aspect of the story. But also there is some hope. We don't have to continue down this path, because I'm showing you the worst of what we can be, but we don't have to choose that future for ourselves. But in not acknowledging those things, I think it just allows for ignorance to reign and for us to continue down paths like this. I personally, though, think that this is a phenomenal work of fiction, even though in some ways it doesn't quite feel like it's entirely fictional. Now, for the silly one, I had no idea until I was at one of my indie bookstores and I had this one listed, and they'll list the reasons why, and it was Junie B. Jones. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Junie B. Jones, but this is a story that has a number of entries, and it just follows this little girl as she is being a silly little girl. And my mom, I have fond memories of reading Junie B. Jones to my mom, and my mom thinking it was the funniest thing ever. So I just have the most wholesome memories associated with Junie B. Jones. But it was banned essentially because she at times engages in behavior that is unbecoming of a child, or something to that extent, where she's not perfect in the eyes of adults who don't view children as human beings with emotions and feelings and who are new in this world. And I couldn't believe it. I remember I took a picture and I sent it to my mom, and we had a laugh, but it was one of those kind of laugh or cry sorts of laughs. But those are two that have been banned. There have been many that I think are great that have been banned, but those are two
that stand out to me.
Hello, my name is Sean. I am Elliot Brooks's husband, just popping in to also give my favorite banned book, and that would be Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. This is actually a collection of several different novels by Kurt Vonnegut, but you can see Slaughterhouse-Five right there. This is from The Atlantic about Slaughterhouse-Five being banned. It has been described as depraved, immoral, psychotic, vulgar, and anti-Christian. And in 1973, the Drake Public School Board in North Dakota set 32 copies aflame in the high school's coal burner. So you know this is a good one. So if you have not read Slaughterhouse-Five, it is a great novel. It is an anti-war novel, which we need more anti-war novels. It's science fiction. It's World War II. It's also funny. And, you know, laughter is also good. So read Slaughterhouse-Five if you want a fun time. Except with also some sadness.
Hi, my name is Steph, and you can find me everywhere at Starry Steph. I wanted to chat about The Pet Duology by one of my favorite authors, Akwaeke Emezi. Both of these books, called Pet and Bitter, have been challenged across the US. Pet is about this teenager named Jam who lives in this allegedly utopian world where all of the adults insist that every monster, basically anyone who harms someone else, has been banished. Except then Jam accidentally brings a painting to life, and the creature that comes out of that painting wants to hunt predators. It says there's a monster living in the house of Jam's best friend, and Jam doesn't even have the tools to understand what that means. She has to figure out how to protect her best friend, all while the adults around her deny everything. Pet is magical, it's heart-wrenching, and it's profound. I read it years ago, and I'm still grappling with the calls to action and the reflections that it prompted. The other book in this duology is called Bitter, which is a prequel that follows Jam's mom. It brings you right into the heart of the protests and the revolution that happened before their utopia was formed, and it's just as excellent of a read. During the 2023 to 2024 school year, Pet was challenged and then banned in 13 different school districts. These were across Florida, Iowa, Kentucky, and Wisconsin. And Bitter was banned in several of these same districts as well. There are so many reasons that Pet should stay on shelves, but generally I just can't talk enough about how this could save a kid's life. It's giving them language around scary situations that they might be going through themselves. They might recognize when friends are in danger or feel more empowered to speak up if something doesn't feel right. It can give them a chance to safely explore a lot of nuance around community care in fictional form. And Pet is also just very casually inclusive. For example, the main character is black and trans and often signs, and her best friend uses a wheelchair. And these are not dull stories at all. Like, kids are gonna want to pick these up just for the joy of reading them and immersing themselves in a totally different world. They're poetic and they're imaginative. This is a duology that is going to resonate with young readers and really readers of any age. I recommend these to everyone.
Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and my favorite banned book is the manga series Fairy Tale. Volumes 1, 2, and 5 were banned in Clay County, Florida. I guess they skipped volumes 3 and 4 for some reason. Fairy Tail started coming out back when I was in high school, and it was cool because, like, for me and some of my friends, this was like the first manga that we could like get into as it was coming out. Fairy Tail absolutely has its flaws, and it definitely has some fan service-y moments. You know, as a fan, you gotta be like, no, wait, please, I swear it's good. There's some funny jokes, there's some really cool art and action sequences, and there's a lot of themes about community, friendship, and being part of something bigger than yourself. And nowadays, I feel like we need a lot more community and friendship. For some people, Fairy Tail was like a gateway franchise that got them into anime and manga, which led to them finding even more beautiful stories that they could enjoy. Some people found communities, friends, and even partners through anime and manga. Some people that I know even became like successful writers and voice actors and comedians and stuff like that. And they would cite Fairy Tail as like one of their favorite anime or one of their favorite manga and as an influence. And that's not me guaranteeing like, hey, kids, read this and you'll be successful. That's me saying that taking this off of library shelves is denying kids the opportunity to find something that could bring them a lot of joy and happiness and could spark creativity that leads them to create something of their own that also brings somebody else a lot of joy and happiness. And I guess I just don't understand why people would want to deny kids that opportunity.
Hello there, I'm Emma Skies. While unfortunately there are a number of really great titles to choose from, I'd say that one of my favorite banned books is Looking for Alaska by John Green, which is nearly the most banned book in schools across the country, being banned in 97 school districts, outpaced only by Jodi Picoult's 19 Minutes being banned in 98, none of which takes into account things like public libraries outside of schools. I think this was the book that first made me really aware of book bans in the US because it was one that I'd read, so when I saw that it was being banned so many places, I was mostly just confused, which then led me down this big curiosity rabbit hole of learning a whole lot about book banning in the US. This is a book about what it means to be a person, what it means to be a teenager, to be a friend, and like so much of John Green's work, it's about learning to imagine the world and the people around us complexly. To recognize that reducing people down to our singular perceptions of them does a disservice to them and to ourselves and can have deeply harmful consequences when we miss any and all signs that someone is struggling. All of which are really important lessons that teenagers are learning on a daily basis as they begin to experience the wider world. I can guess at a number of reasons why this book is banned so many places, all of which are ridiculous, but the funniest of which has to be the accusation that this book contains pornography for what has to be the most awkward scene of an attempt at sexual contact between two teenagers who have no idea what they're doing, and it's silly, and it's clinical, and it's super awkward, and then they're like, okay, you wanna do homework now? But book banners rely on taking singular pages, paragraphs, sentence, even singular words out of context to twist something innocuous into something nefarious and convince you that it needs to be censored to protect the children. Ironically, it is book banners' complete inability to learn the lessons of works like John Green's and imagine the world complexly, imagine teenagers complexly as full human beings that pushes them to do things like banning thousands of books across the country.
Hello, my name is Jemila from the channel Jemila Be Reading here on YouTube. Rachel reached out to me and asked to talk about my favorite banned book, and I am here to talk about Beloved by Toni Morrison. Now, this book and most of Toni Morrison's backlist has been banned extensively across the last, honestly, 30 to 40 years. In fact, Beloved has been on the American Library Association's annual list of the top 10 most challenged books in the years of 2006 and 2012, and this book continues to be challenged across the United States. I really love this book. This was one of my favorite books from last year, 2024, and this is actually my first full-length Toni Morrison novel. I just absolutely adored this and enjoyed the experience of doing a tandem read while listening to the audiobook and reading it physically. It's a little bit of a gothic ghost story. It is set in a post-Civil War era where we're following Setha and her daughter Denver in this house that is being haunted by the dead spirit of Setha's other child. And we watch as both Setha and Denver deal with the fallout of this and the fallout of the circumstances of this child's death. And we follow the lengths that a mother will go to protect her child. And it was truly a harrowing but really important read, and I highly recommend the audiobook. It's narrated by Toni Morrison, and she has such a lovely voice to carry you through some of the heartache of this book, and I highly recommend it.
Hello, my friend. My name is Meg from Meg's Tea Room. I'm so honored to be here to tell you about my favorite banned book. Thank you so much for Rachel for inviting me to do this. I'm so excited. This is a story that I've loved my whole life. So my favorite banned book is The Giver by Lois Lowry. I actually did a reread of it recently just to refresh my mind and make sure, you know, I don't remember a lot of the content of it. I just remember the vibe of how I felt when I read it. And so I wanted to make sure it was still a good story. I did that and watched the movie again. Did you guys know Taylor Swift's in the movie? She's in the movie. That's so weird. Anyway, this book has been a frequent target for book bans in the US over the years, mostly because it tackles some pretty heavy topics. The story takes place in this dystopian world where emotions and memories are tightly controlled. And though it is, I believe, a middle grade, the characters in it are, 11 and 12. The book doesn't shy away from tough topics like euthanasia and infanticide and even suicide. Some parents and school boards have argued that these themes are too intense for young readers, which has led to many, many bans and restrictions in states like even California, I think in 1994. I believe it's not restricted there anymore though. We've got Montana and Kansas, Ohio, Florida, of course, and even Colorado. Another complaint I found that came up quite often was that the book is just too dark or it promotes some very anti-authority ideals, which, yeah. Sometimes authority sucks. So what do I think and why is it my favorite? Well, I think The Giver is an incredibly valuable book for young readers because it's encouraging and showcasing the importance of critical thinking skills about real world issues. Literally throughout the book, that's what our main character is having to learn, is how to think critically about his environment and the society around him. So even during my reread, I was taking notes and having these discussions about individuality and freedom, emotions, and the consequences of a society that prioritizes, sameness over choice. In this world, there is a lack of color, and diversity in all its forms has been stripped. And sameness is equated with safety. So this community doesn't allow anyone to make their own choices because they fear they'll make the wrong choice, which, woof. So on the surface, everything looks, calm and kind, especially. But there's no real trust in this society at all. And kindness has zero weight. That was a big thing for me rereading it, was kindness has no weight because they're removed from the freedom of choice. I just think this book has the potential to actually help kids and teens with empathy by exploring what it means to truly feel and to remember. And I just think it sparks these really meaningful conversations about ethics and decision-making and personal responsibility that are so important. And while the themes are heavy, yes, suicide, infanticide, these things are discussed. They're never celebrated. When these darker concepts are introduced, to this 12-year-old boy, they're horrifying to him. It's not a positive interaction he's having with these big topics. I think these themes are presented in a way that allow young readers to really engage with these big ideas at their own level. And I think that makes The Giver not just a great story, but an important one, especially right now. Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this and letting me share a little more about this story. If you're looking to support banned books and you want to purchase some or rent some from your local library, this is a great one to check out for sure.
Hi, I'm Gaia. I'm a reader. I've been a lifelong reader, and I'm here to talk about a couple of my favorite banned books. Native Son by Richard Wright was banned in Florida and is pending investigation. It's pending an investigation in Orange County Public Schools. I was pretty young when I read the book. I was around 10 years old, and actually my father made me read it. The book is about Bigger Thomas, a young black man living in poverty in 1930s Chicago. And in a moment of fear and panic, he accidentally murders a white. The book focuses on his guilt, on the crime, as well as society's guilt for how his life turned out the way it did. The book has been challenged repeatedly over the years, including in high school libraries and classrooms all over the US for being profane, violent, and sexually graphic. The book has many important topics to discuss, and I think the fact that I was reading it at 10 years old and when it was able to speak to my parents about it, while now it's being banned in high schools, it's just wild to me. Recently, I read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. It is about the history of racism in the United States and its effect on people. The book hits on a lot of feelings that I've struggled with over the years, and James Baldwin has a beautiful way with words and is able to touch on topics in a very compelling way. I also found out recently that James Baldwin was pretty critical of Native Son. He considered it a failed protest novel, and I think that makes for an excellent discussion. Unfortunately, in 2022, The Fire Next Time was banned in Florida because of its racial content. The book seems to be back on shelves now, but another one of James Baldwin's novels, Go Tell It on the Mountain, is listed as banned on PEN America's 2023 to 2024 list. Both of these writers, in different ways, provide an excellent view of racism in America and its effects on people, and I find these discussions critical in school and at home. As far as what age these discussions need to take place, I think that's up to each child's parents to decide. Unfortunately, anyone can challenge these books, so my main issue is random person who may not even have children is making the decision on what other people's kids have access to read. I also think it's important to mention that some white Americans and some non-Black American families of color limit discussion of racial tension or the history of racism in general because they think that these discussions are too uncomfortable for a young child to have. However, Black families often find these discussions necessary to happen as soon as possible for a child's safety. All I know is that ignoring a country's history has never made it better, and politicians often claim to be ashamed of a history that they are rushing to repeat.
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm a model who's read, and my favorite banned book is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a YA historical fiction set in 1950 San Francisco about Chinese-American teenager Lily discovering that she's a lesbian. It was the winner of the 2021 National Award in Young People's Literature, as well as the Stonewall Book Award, winner of the Best Book for the Chinese American Library Association, a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, among many other honors, and a New York Times bestseller. This is currently banned in 16 states due to having queer characters and explicit sexual themes. This book normalizes lesbian love. It sheds light on the queer community in a positive manner. It's about standing up for what you believe in and facing prejudice, and yes, some sexual content. Now, I'm of the mind that you can talk to anybody at any age about any topic as long as you do it in an age-appropriate way that they can understand at their level. And I hate to break it to you, but teenagers want to explore sexuality, and that's totally natural and fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're going to write a book about the teen experience, it makes sense to have that as a part of growing up. This by no means is a spicy book. Like, we are exploring sexuality and relationships and intimacy in a way that a teenager can understand, and maybe someone reading this could bring back to their own relationship in a healthy manner. To quote Melinda Lowe's website, being queer is not shameful, sexuality in general is not shameful, and queer sex is not shameful. And as a proud sapphic myself, I want to say that everyone deserves love, whatever that means to you.
Hi, my name is Carmen, and I love to read and recommend books by Latinx authors. If you're looking for more contemporary Latinx literature across all genres and age ranges, then you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube as @Tomes and Textiles. I want to take a moment to thank Rachel for just being an amazing advocate against book bans and for asking me to collaborate on this video. Your work is so important and so special, and you know that I love you. Today I am here to tell you about a banned book that I love, and that is Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. I loved this story about a young girl who finds her voice to speak against someone who SA'd her. And I do want to caveat my recommendation by saying that I do understand that most banned books are written by queer and trans individuals sharing queer and trans stories, or by BIPOC and particularly Black authors. I'm using this book in particular to speak against this administration and the fact that we have a SAer-in-chief, and that is something that is modeled behavior that trickles down to children. Speak is a novel about finding your voice in light of horrific events. And it's not one about screaming and yelling your truth. It's one about just being able to tell the story of it, which I think in this age where we are gaslit, where we are told history isn't what it is, where we are denied even the ability to speak, this is a novel where, despite being hurt, Melinda could find her voice. And in this day and age where victims are questioned, where speaking out hurts you, where the truth is considered relative, Speak is a novel of finding your truth and being able to speak it, being able to express it, and having that latitude to do so. It's such an important book for people to find and speak their truths, especially when they have been through circumstances as dire as Melinda. Speak is one book among the 35-page document that the Florida Department of Education put out in the 2023-2024 school year that bans this book across all 73 Florida school districts. This book about speaking out has been silenced by the Florida Department of Education.
Hey, I'm Celine. You can find me at Cel McNally on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky, where I like to talk all about speculative fiction, particularly fantasy and sci-fi. My favorite banned book is Kindred by Octavia Butler. If you know anything about me, that is not shocking because Octavia Butler is considered, rightly so, to be one of the best science fiction writers. Kindred follows a young Black author named Dana who is ripped from 1976 into the antebellum South to save a young white boy. It's a brilliant way to showcase the ugly history of racism and how it has left scars in America that are still felt today, how despite modernism and progress, racism is still pervasive. This book is suspenseful, it's horrific, the characters feel so real, and Octavia Butler has this incredible way of connecting things from the past to the present. Like many books by Black authors, this book has been widely challenged and banned across the United States. Let's talk about recent places this book has been banned. According to PEN America, in the last school year, a Wisconsin public school banned Kindred after one parent challenged it. Orange County Public Schools also banned Kindred and its graphic novel adaptation, along with approximately 700 other books, in response to House Bill 1069, which has since passed. I'm not going to get into all the details about how this House bill broadens the scope of book banning in this state, but one thing that it does, specifically in context to Kindred, is that it allows for things that have depictions or descriptions of sexual conduct
that is now a basis to ban or challenge books in Florida. And that ignores context of why sexual content is in some of these books. In Kindred, it's because it portrays an assault, which I think is really important, especially knowing the material that Kindred is dealing with. Unsurprisingly, many of the other approximately 700 books that were banned in Orange County at that time also feature and are written by marginalized people. Here's why I think Kindred should be on our shelves, other than the fact that it's an utterly fantastic novel. One, it is an unflinchingly graphic portrayal of slavery, which is itself inherently graphic, and it doesn't seek to sanitize those horrors. This is a history that shouldn't be watered down and it shouldn't be censored. Nonfiction books get banned too, but fiction books also deserve to be on shelves. They are also valuable ways of conveying and understanding history. Stories are how people in all cultures across time have communicated histories, cultures, teachings, ideas. And two, I just don't support book banning, full stop. I don't think that there's ever a good reason to censor books. I love Kindred, so I'm of the opinion that everyone should read it. Of course, check your content warnings, but more importantly than that, everyone should have access to read it.
Hey y'all, I'm Ray, aka Ray the Reviewer on Instagram and TikTok, where I post diverse book recommendations across the board, from children's to middle grade to young adult to adult, fantasy, speculative fiction, contemporary, graphic novels, basically any genre, any age category. And one of my favorite banned books of all time is Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's a story of a woman who was enslaved, escaped slavery, but was captured, and rather than having her child, her infant, return to a life of slavery, she murders that child. And then slavery ends and she is free, and she must now live with what that anguish has caused her. It's a book I read when I was around 18 years old during my freshman year of college, and it's stayed with me ever since. I've read it at least one more time since then, and it's been banned across the United States in various school districts and libraries because it talks about the realities of slavery and how painful that was for so many people.
Hi, I'm Alex from the channel Books and Paperbacks, where I uplift queer and trans books. My favorite banned book is Flamer by Mike Curato. It's on the ALA's most banned books in 2023 list, coming in at number 5. It was challenged 67 times for LGBTQ+ content and claimed to be sexually explicit. It was also removed from a Texas school library. Why I think this should be on shelves is because it will save lives. This is such an important book. Set in 1995, this graphic novel follows Aiden, a 14-year-old boy, going to a Boy Scouts camp for the summer. He's having a horrible time, and mentally he's not doing well. His family is Catholic, and around the house they are spewing anti-LGBT rhetoric, and at school he's being bullied profusely. When he goes to this camp, the bullying doesn't stop. He just doesn't want to exist anymore. It is so heartbreaking, but a much needed book. As a kid like Aiden, I would have loved to have this book. Aiden experiences suicidal thoughts, he self-harms, and he has depression, all because of the people around him making him feel horrible about himself. This leads to internalized homophobia and not allowing him to properly explore his sexuality. He is gay, but he doesn't feel good about it, and how could he be gay if everything he's being told is bad? So while at this camp, Aiden is at his lowest point. His best friend is acting weird around him. He's being bullied for both his mannerisms and his race. So Aiden decides that he is going to take his own life. This is such a powerful book. I love the way that the author is able to implement flames as a metaphor, and the whole point of flames in this book is so well done. No child should be stripped of this book. It is going to save lives, and the author has said so himself. It is such an important book, and as somebody who sees childhood me in Aiden, I would have loved this book as a kid. Also, as a graphic novel, I think it's important to recognize that a graphic novel is being banned. Graphic novels are also a very powerful form of literature, and they are an accessibility tool for many kids. And again, I don't think any kid should be disallowed to read this book. If you're interested in this book and want to know more about the author's stance on his book being banned, challenged, and removed from a library, I highly recommend the podcast episode by NPR's Code Switch. They did a wonderful interview with him.
Hi, my name is Sheena, and I am a bookish content creator. I'm known as She Be Reading on all of my socials. So my favorite book that has appeared on the challenged and or banned list here in America is Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Peterson. This is a children's novel that centers around Jesse and his best friend Leslie, who create a make-believe world called Terabithia. Now, I was actually surprised that this book was number 8 on the ALA's most challenged books, and that's between 1990 and 2000. And the reason being is because the book alludes to witchcraft in some parts. This is a book about children who do what children do, which is play make-believe. Make it make sense. I did want to give an honorable mention of one of my most favorite books that have been challenged by the ALA, and that is Drama by Raina Tagelmeyer. This graphic novel centers around Callie and her friends who are preparing to put on their school production of Moon Over Mississippi. Now, I am a theater girly through and through. I've been a stagehand my entire life. It's my entire career. So of course, I love this book. And as you can see, my 9-year-old and I are actually doing a reread of this book. Now, this graphic novel has been on the challenge list several times over the past several years recently. And the reason being, because there are LGBTQ characters in this book.
Hey everyone, my name's Therese, and my favorite banned book of all time, or at least one of my favorite banned books of all time, has to be Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This book will always hold a special place in my heart. I read this around the time it came out, and I want to say like 2016-ish, 2017, right before the movie came out. I think that the messaging that this book had really just spoke to me. It made me feel really seen and really heard with all the same kind of thoughts that I had about coming out and being queer and being bi, about just the discussions about how like straight shouldn't be the default, just as white shouldn't be the default. And I just felt really seen and heard and comforted that there was someone out there like me who had the same fears about coming out, who had the same concerns about being queer. And I just love the fact that I felt seen and heard from this. This book has always been a lifeline for me in such a very, I wouldn't say tumultuous time, but such a very scary transition between coming out to friends and family, specifically family, and how that meant my worldview would be shifting or how people would view me differently. And it just felt comforting that there were other people, even if they were fictional, who felt the same way, who had the same fears, who had the same hesitations. And even though this Simon is very clearly fictional, I'm sure there are other people who are very not fictional who feel the same way. And I really love the message, and I feel like it's so important for kids to see themselves in fiction, in literature in general, just so they feel like they belong, they have a place. And I think it needs to be in schools still. Very important for kids to be able to see themselves and to feel heard. So this book is just very important to me, and I will always recommend it.
Hi everyone, my name is Lou. You might know me from the now comatose channel Lou Reading Things. I couldn't pass the opportunity to talk about my favorite book of all times, which is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Amongst everything that I've read so far in my life, in my almost 30 years of life, this is truly the book that has impacted me the most. Kurt Vonnegut is very well known in the United States as a major figure of American literature, especially 20th century American literature. He has a very biting, very sarcastic way of writing, which resonates a lot with me. But specifically, Slaughterhouse-Five is a semi-autobiographic book. Kurt Vonnegut served in World War II, and he was actually a prisoner of war in Germany, where he witnessed the bombing of Dresden, which was the largest non-nuclear bombing in World War II history. Kurt Vonnegut was very much impacted by what he saw happening there and a lot of the moral conflict that he had regarding the atrocities that he witnessed against the people that his government said that were the bad guys, and he knew that they were the bad guys, but he was still devastated by the sheer amount of death and destruction. Spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to write this book. Eventually, when Vietnam War came around, he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, talking about his experiences as a prisoner of war, but he doesn't necessarily write as in this is me and this is what I was doing. He writes from the point point of view of a character called Billy Pilgrim. And so the book begins by him talking a lot about war and the impact of war and the pointlessness of it. The book itself, the story itself, begins when he says a very, very famous line, which I think summarizes a lot what he's trying to do with this book. Listen, Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. Billy has gone to sleep a senile widower and awakened on his wedding day. He has walked through a door in 1955 and come out another one in 1941. He has gone back through that door to find himself in 1963. He has seen his birth and death many times, he says, and pays random visits to all the events in between, he says. So the point is that this book tells the story of this man called Billy Pilgrim, who was also a prisoner of war in Dresden, just like Kurt Vonnegut was. And he was also imprisoned in a slaughterhouse, which was the 5th slaughterhouse. That's why it's called Slaughterhouse 5. Most of the experiences that Billy experiences in the war were experiences that Kurt himself or his colleagues actually experienced during the course of the war. It also shows, and I think like a lot of people say that this is science fiction, or not necessarily, because Billy Pilgrim at a certain point in his life comes to be abducted by aliens, and he stays in a human zoo, and he comes to, you know, understand there is no point in trying to change anything because everything has already happened, and everything that will happen has already happened. And since he goes back and forth in time, he doesn't necessarily know about where exactly in timeline it is. So the aliens that abduct him see time differently, and they sort of see everything as happening at the same time. And so there is no reason for you to be sad when someone dies, but also no reason to try to change anything because everything will happen regardless of what you try to do. And so this is a story about a character who becomes complacent with his experiences and the horror of war. But he becomes complacent and unstuck in time because the war affects him so badly that he feels like he doesn't belong to that time frame anymore. It's a story that talks about war, the futility of it, the futility of trying to see people as enemies when you see that they are not necessarily what people are trying to tell you that they are. But not only that, it's a story that says, you know, those people might be evil, and yet I am devastated by the devastation that we have caused them, with cause or with not cause, and there must be another way to fix this. And so this is a book that was banned for brief references to homosexualist behavior, is what they called, and also to a brief sex scene. In all truth, this is a book that was banned because it reminds people not to accept the brutality of war and occupation. And I feel like this is the reason why people don't want young people reading Kurt Vonnegut and more young people reading Slaughterhouse 5, because it's a book that was written in the 60s and 70s, but it's a book that it's still very much present in the way that Kurt Vonnegut is saying, hey, you have this country that is trying to ask you to be complacent with a lot of atrocities. Don't be this person. Don't become unstuck in time. Don't think that this is how things have always been and this is how they will always be. The point that proves his point the most is when he writes in the first beginning of the chapters. He's talking to famous people about writing the Dresden book. He has talked about how his anti-war sentiments were seen by people, and people in situations of power and big positions of power. There is this one part that I feel like really narrows the point down of what Kurt Vonnegut was trying to say. Over the years, people I've met have often asked me what I'm working on, and I've usually replied that the main thing was a book about Dresden. I said that to Harrison Starr, the movie maker, one time. And he raised his eyebrows and inquired, is it an anti-war book? Yes, I said, I guess. You know what I say to people when I hear they're writing anti-war books? I say, why don't you write an anti-glacier book instead? What he meant, of course, was that there would always be wars, that they were as easy to stop as glaciers. I believe that too. And even if wars didn't keep coming like glaciers, there would still be plain old death. The point that he was trying to make here about how we see things as inevitable is that we have come to a point where we are losing the glaciers, and yet we have not yet lost the wars. And we accept this as normal. You know, this is how things have always been, and this is how they will always be. But the point that he's bringing up here is that we shouldn't be complacent in that. Well, I understand why they banned this. Do I agree with it? No, I understand why. This is one of those books that you could say is a very, very dangerous book if you don't want people to think.
Hi, I'm Naomi over at From the Mixed Up Desk. I am an Indigenous book content creator and publisher with Bindery Books. My favorite banned Indigenous book is Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley. This is a YA thriller thriller with a very strong indigenous teenage female lead. Our main character, Donis, witnesses a murder and now she has to help the FBI solve it. Was removed from shelves in Tennessee, blocked by the Brandywine School District, and removed in Fort Worth and in Escambia County, Florida. Author responded on Twitter by saying that they banned Firekeeper's daughter and they're on native land, like within an actual tribe's federally recognized area. It's incredibly important for young people to have representation and to be able to see themselves in books. And it is crucial that we have access to stories that are not European-centric. This is definitely one of my favorite books, and everybody needs to read it.
Hello, my name is Michael Laborn, and I'm a bookish content creator that can be found on most of the apps, wherever you take in content. I'm also the founder of Left Unread, which is a publishing imprint that is specifically focused on uplifting and amplifying Black and brown authors. I want to take a moment to talk to you about banned books. Specifically, I want to talk about The Giver by Lois Lowry. Now, it has been decades since I read this book, which pains me to be able to say, but it is the case. So it is not the freshest story in my mind. I couldn't pull up the particulars, I can't tell you the main character's name, I can't walk you through the details of the story, or even tell you the ending. And yet here I am, on the brink of middle age, telling you that it was one of the most important books in my development, because it made me question the value of history. I won't pretend it doesn't have heavy themes, because it has been decades, as I said, and I still remember the weight of this story, which is one of the reasons that this book has been challenged and banned in so many schools and libraries, because parents feel that it is concerning content for young minds. But here's the thing, that's kind of the point of the story. The idea that we can take away information, that we can take away the truth, and it will in some way improve the lives and the minds and the worldview of the people who are being denied access to the reality of the world around them. It's ludicrous, even when the people that we're talking about are children, especially when the people that we're talking about are children. Without access to the truth in all of its complexity and nuance and sometimes terror, we are ill prepared to protect ourselves, not just from the dangers around us, but also from becoming the kind of people who do not care about the dangers that our neighbors experience. And that is a lesson that I learned in The Giver, and a lesson that I would be devastated to know that future children will not learn. So for me, even with all of its heavy content and its terrifying themes, I think this book belongs on shelves, not just because it has the right to be there, but because at the end of the day, the truth is relevant, and it doesn't just become relevant once you reach a certain age.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and my channel here on YouTube is @ReadingFairy. You can call me Other Rachel if you need to, that's okay. I know that Rachel has me in her phone that way.
Okay, true.
I was asked to talk about one of my favorite banned books, and the book that I chose is Banned Book Club by Kim Hyun-suk and her husband Ryan Estrada. This book is actually a graphic novel memoir, which I've never read before, and I loved it. It's the experience that Kim Hyun-suk had going to college during a time where South Korea was under a dictatorship. So in 1979, Chun Doo-hwan staged a coup and took over the government in South Korea. He unlawfully enacted martial law on a lot of the major cities, and the citizens paid the consequences of that. So not only is this book an account of the history that happened back then, but it's also Hyun-suk's personal experience as a college student during that time. Personally, I really loved the experience of reading this book. I've never read a graphic novel memoir before, as I said, and admittedly, I don't know much about the history of South Korea. I thought this was a really eye-opening read for me. Hyun-suk went to college and had to learn what communism and democracy actually were through her peers and through reading banned books back then, since the dictatorship government wasn't allowing them to learn about those topics. I really loved seeing Hyun-suk's personal struggle as she realizes that she is living under a dictatorship and that everything she thought she knew about her government was a lie. I also really loved this memoir because I think it highlighted a lot of different forms of activism. It showed protesting on the front lines. It showed reading banned literature. It showed people who were helping to distribute news and media that was telling the truth about what was happening. It even showed people who didn't want to be as active in their activism, and just the simple act of educating yourself can also be a form of resistance. This book was banned in Clay County schools in Florida thanks to a man named Bruce Friedman who initiated it. I saw during my research that Bruce uses the same wording for almost all of his challenges because a lot of them are unfounded. However, in this one he specifically said it's anti-government, it will create anarchists. He also said it would damage the soul of anyone who read it, and he also claimed that this will not help make anyone a better citizen. Since since Bruce got this book banned off of Clay County School shelves, I do believe it has since been reinstated. I also think that they immediately put it back on the challenge list for pending investigation, and it is also on a list of challenged books of schools in Michigan. It's important for books like Banned Book Club to be in school libraries. This book highlights how empowering yourself through knowledge and education can help you understand your own government and your own rights as a citizen. This book is about an actual, literal, historical thing that happened in South Korea. And I think it has a lesson to teach us about recognizing tyrannical governments, unjust, unlawful dictatorships, and what it can look like to be part of the solution for that. After reading this book, it was very clear to me that this book is pro-democracy. It is not anti-government, it is pro-democracy. It's anti-dictatorship. Again, it shows that resilience can come in many forms. It highlights the real human experience of a college student who had to live through this historical event. It's important to learn about and read the histories and stories by people who lived through these historical events so we can learn from them and not make the same mistakes. I want to leave you with my favorite quote from this book, and that is, you have to wonder, do they ban books because they see danger in the author, or do they ban these books because they see themselves in the villains? Which is a quote that just absolutely hit home and feels very accurate, and I still think about it to this day. Thank you, Rachel, for having me and letting me talk about this book with you, and thank you everybody else for listening. I hope that you'll pick up this book because I really do think it's one that's worth everybody's time.
Hi, I'm Jeanne, also known as Fangirl Jeanne, and my favorite banned book is Melissa by Alex Gino, published in 2022. I like Melissa because it is a story that's written for children but doesn't talk down to them, and it shows a happy transgender coming out narrative, again, for kids, and it really tells it in a way that kids, regardless of their gender, can really relate to the situation of having something that you want to share with people that you love and care about, but you're concerned about how they'll react to it. And of course, it all ends up happily ever after. Unsurprisingly, Melissa has been challenged in many states, including Iowa, Texas, Wisconsin, Florida, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Michigan. Most recently, in September of 2024, 2 school districts in South Carolina banned the book. The National Institute of Health found that 82% of transgender individuals have considered ending their life. 40% have attempted it. A study by the Trevor Project found a significant increase in transgender and non-binary young people attempting to end their lives when their home state enacted just one anti-trans law, the highest increase being among those under the age of 18. Now more than ever, we need stories like Melissa, not only to show us transgender kids getting to experience the freedom of expressing who they are, while also being loved and supported and protected by their family, friends, and community.
Hello everybody, my name is Jadzia, and I live here on YouTube over at the Widely Read Librarian. I'm a bit sick, so pardon my my voice. Today we're going to talk about my favorite banned book, which is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. The first time I read this book was for a Women in Lit class at my community college, my first year of college, and it definitely changed the way I think about writing and sharing stories. Now, this book is banned and has been banned in several different states over the years. Actually, in 2023, it was on the ALA list for the top 10 most banned book of the year. It was number 6. I'm not aware of any current challenges or bans presently. It talks about racism, sexual assault, incest. Those are very touchy topics. Our main character, Piccola, has dreamed her whole entire life of being a white girl with blue eyes, and she is an African American girl who gets made fun of for her hair, her skin color, her eyes, her tone, everything. We're seeing the world through her eyes and the eyes of other girls around her. It's a coming of age story. It is a very poignant and important book. As beautiful as it is written, the contents is devastating, and I believe that this book is important and should stay in schools because these things happen to young girls as they are growing into their bodies. They are coming of age, and if we don't talk about these things, if we brush them under the rug, we run the risk of isolating girls at very young ages. We run the risk of shaming them for their experiences that may be against their will, and we run the risk of it happening again because they don't know how to speak out or get to safety. While I didn't read it in high school, some of the themes of things that were happening in this book were happening to girls in my high school, in my middle school, and they didn't know how to talk about it or they felt shame about it. So I highly recommend this book. I think it's very important to have access to when you are introduced to those things. You want to feel safe knowing that you're not alone. You have people looking out for you, and you have people that understand you. Even if it is a character in a book, it's so important to have community in those moments. So that is why The Bluest Eye is my favorite banned book.
Hey Hani Westjay, my name is Michelle. I am an enrolled member in the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and a proud Oglala Lakota, and this is my stack. We Are Water Protectors. This is by Carol Lindstrom, illustrated by Michaela Gold, contested in Brandywine, Michigan in 2023, and it was banned in Northampton, Pennsylvania area school district in 2022. They were characterized as racist, divisive, and socialist after it was donated by a organization. I really love this book because not only is the illustration good, but it also teaches children to protect the land that we live on, and I think it's something for everyone. I would have to say that this one has the most contests I've seen on the entire list that I scrolled. Angeline Boulay is an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of the Chippewa Indians. This was published in 2021, and this was removed in Fort Worth, Texas in August of 2023 by the Independent School District. Cesar Padilla said, "Some books were selected for review to determine if they were developmentally appropriate. It was blocked by Brandywine School District in 2023 in Niles, Michigan. A social studies teacher applied and won a grant for $5,000 from We Need Diverse Books to add diverse books to the middle school, high school. The school board president, Thomas Payne, said the book donation violates district policy, specifically targeting sexually explicit books. Bully said on Twitter, they banned Firekeeper's Daughter and they're on native land, like an actual tribe's federally recognized service area. What the f? Turning down free books from diverse books because book banning. I grew up in this area and needed the accurate representation." This was also moved for review in Escambia County, Florida in December of 2023 due to fears it may violate the state's new laws banning materials with sexual content. In Wilson County Schools of Tennessee, it was banned in violation of state law passed in 2022 that prohibits public school libraries from having books with nudity or depictions or descriptions of sexual excitement, sexual violence, and sadomasochistic abuse. Firekeeper's Daughter is about a young girl, Donis, and after losing her friend, she investigates and starts learning about everything that's going on, including a circle of lies and deceit, and it is so good, and I highly recommend it. And last but not least, we have Fry Bread by Kevin Noble Malliard, illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. This one was also part of the ban in Northampton, PA in 2022, also qualified as divisive, racist, and socialist. It was also challenged in York, PA in 2021, but has since been lifted after a year, and it was temporarily banned in Duval County, Florida in 2023. It is important to read banned books that maybe you might not like or you might not feel fit your own personal values, because once we start isolate why we don't like something or why it shouldn't be there, that's kind of open to interpretation, and things that are really great are going to be put off to the side or removed altogether completely just because of how one person feels. And I don't think that that's fair, even if it is something that you personally don't agree with. We are all here, and we're all here for a reason, so it's important to try to learn about each other and try to get along as best as possible. These are my picks for the banned books. Thank you to Rachel for allowing me to be part of this project, and I hope that you pick up one or all of these books very soon.
Hi, I'm Jose Orlando. I'm a queer bookish content creator from Puerto Rico, and these are some of my favorite banned books. Cemetery Boys by Eden Thomas. It is a queer YA Latina coming-of-age romance. It is urban fantasy, and it follows Jadriel, a young trans boy that comes from a family of brujos, and on his quest to gain his family's acceptance, he summons by mistake a ghost, and he doesn't know how to get rid of him. So Jadriel and Julian the ghost will work together to figure out the mystery behind Julian's death, and and also help Jadzia prove to his family that he is a true brujo. Cemetery Boys has been banned in Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, and you will wonder why. I guess some people don't like having a main character that is trans, gay, and Latino. There's also All That's Left in the World by Eric J. Brown. It is a queer YA dystopian coming-of-age romance that follows two young queer boys as they find each other and fall in love in the end of times. And you know, survive a lot of danger in this dystopian world. All That's Left in the World has been banned in Kentucky and Malaysia. Yeah, the country. And why would they ban it? Queer boys. And also The Magic Fish by Tron Linh Nguyen. It is a queer YA graphic novel that follows a young Vietnamese American kid that is trying to come out to his non-English speaking Vietnamese mother by reading her modern retellings of fairy tales. And oh my god, this book is so beautiful. And just like with Cemetery Boys, this book has been banned in Tennessee, Texas, and Florida. I guess some people don't like to read stories with queer kids that have immigrant parents. These books are amazing and they should be in school libraries. Why, you say? First of all, they are age appropriate. They teach kids about empathy, about real life issues, about real people's life experiences, and they sure are entertaining. And you know, who wouldn't want kids to grow up to be outstanding, empathetic adults?
Hello everybody, it's Thomas from SFF 180. Thanks very much to Rachel for inviting me today. The entire ideological foundation of censorship is not protection, it's control. Its entire premise is that we are weak and incapable of making our own moral judgments as to which ideas are safe and healthy for us to consume and which aren't. Therefore, we need someone or a group of someones morally superior to us to make those judgments for us. And you can always tell who the morally superior people are because they wave a holy book around and they talk your ears off about the God they without ever honestly letting on that this God is not necessarily the one in the book so much as the one they see when they look in the mirror. Now, censorship and book bans might not sound like all that bad an idea in cases where, I don't know, maybe you're trying to keep sexually explicit material out of the hands of children. Okay. But when you watch what book banners actually do instead of just listening to what they say, you see something else entirely. For instance, here in Texas, a massive list of books was drawn up about 3 years ago by the usual suspects who think words are the devil. And while some of these complained about either real or imagined sexual content, many of the dozens of requests to have books removed from library shelves focused on work by, you guessed it, authors of color, who were just writing about the experience of being someone of color. Many of the books flagged for removal did not even have reasons given for why their removal was demanded. It's one of these books that I will be talking about here. I won't say this is my favorite banned book, which I know is what Rachel asked for, but I do think it's an interesting book for young readers that seems to have been slept on by, well, everybody except book banners in Texas, I guess. Walter Mosley is a guy best known for his crime fiction, although he has dipped his toes into adult science fiction every once in a while. His best known book might be his 1990 debut, Devil in a Blue Dress, which was made into a movie starring Denzel. 47, which came out in 2005, is the only YA title that I know of by Mosley. It's the first-person story of 47. A nearly 200-year-old former plantation slave who, one day when he was around 14, met a mysterious wanderer, a runaway slave named Tall John, who carried a yellow bag full of strange devices and healing potions and claimed to be a 3,000-year-old traveler from a faraway planet called El, where race isn't a thing and there are no masters or slaves. Now, the theme here is about rising above and overcoming your oppression, and the character of Tall John is an interesting variation on High John the Conqueror, kind of a folk hero, spirit-being trickster god from the slave religion called Hoodoo. Now, while the storytelling in 47 is often uneven and its messaging can be really on the nose, I still think Mosley makes his story adventurous, thrilling, harrowing, funny, touching, and ultimately inspiring. This day and age, when the current government doesn't even want slavery taught at all anymore, I think it's a worthy story to get into young readers' hands.
Reading saved my life when I was a kid. One book in particular that's banned and that impacted my life was Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets to the Universe. Some themes in that book include navigating queer identity as a teenager, navigating cultural differences, navigating having to adapt to your environment. When I read it, I thought it perfectly captured what it felt like to be a teenager, especially being a teenager who's different, trying to figure that out. I don't think Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets to the Universe should be banned. Reading was a place where I could escape my own reality. I felt like I was understood by the people who wrote these books. I felt seen through these book characters that I was reading about. It was a very important and fundamental part of my identity. In general, I don't believe that books should be banned by the government. That is a violation of our constitutional rights. It goes into freedom of speech, freedom to consume, whatever material we want to consume. A lot of these books that are being banned have changed the lives of so many youth in America.
And you're back to me. My favorite banned book for this video, at least, is going to be The ABCs of Black History, which is a book that my two kids love. They have loved this for years. This is a children's picture book about Black history. We love it so much that the dust jacket is gone because we've read it so many times. It has pages like E is for education, for expanding the mind, like Ruby Bridges, Linda Brown, and the Little Rock Nine, the first Black children in all white schools. They opened the doors and challenged the rules. And of course, we know that a book about Ruby Bridges was also challenged. Ruby Bridges, by the way, is still alive today. Imagine knowing that the hatred and racism that you experienced as a child is not good enough for other children to learn about. So as you can see, this is an age-appropriate children's picture book. Again, I've been reading this to my children for years. My youngest, when he was 2, I bought this, but the Miami-Dade School District here in Florida where I live said that it is not appropriate for the age range that it is intended for, and designated it as only being available to middle schoolers. What middle schooler is going to pick this up? And the point is that now, because it's in a middle school and it's not going to get picked up, it's going to get weeded. They're going to take it out because it's not circulating anymore. They're going to say, oh, no kid wants to read this. That's because you purposely put it in a school where it's not going to get picked up. And that is another form of censorship. It's a very sneaky form of censorship, and it works. The complaint was filed by a parent on this book, who also filed a complaint for The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman. That parent said that the poem indirectly contained hate messages and believed it could cause confusion and indoctrinate students. The parent said that this book is critical race theory and indoctrination. A children's book talking about real people, some of whom are still alive, is critical race theory. A legal theory created by lawyers and taught in higher education? Okay, I guess. The author said, disgusted to hear that a Miami-Dade school has banned the ABCs of Black history, citing indirect hate messages along with many other books that make zero sense to keep from children. This only further affirms me that there is revolutionary power in understanding history, and it strengthens my resolve to do whatever I can to see that every child has access to these stories. I'm going to make this into a series, so if you are a content creator and you're interested in participating in this, or if you already did and you want to participate again, please reach out to me. I am begging the book community to get in on the conversation. It is not enough, though, to just read the books in isolation of your own home. Part of the problem is that these people are saying these things are about these books that are just not true, and we need to dispel the myths. We need to say, I read this book, it is a children's picture book, and there is nothing inappropriate that would designate it as only being appropriate for middle schoolers. And if you can, tell your local politicians that. Again, thank you so much to everybody who participated in this. This means the world to me that you all are willing to talk about this. I know that content creation takes time, and I so appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives to do this. Your voice is not meaningless, your voice is needed. Everyone's socials will be linked below so you can go follow. Please, in the comments, leave your favorite banned or censored or challenged book down below, and if you can, tell me where it was challenged and why and by whom. And tell me why you believe that it should stay on shelves. Thank you again so much for watching. I will see you next time. I'll see you for the next episode of this. Bye.